Twilight Sparkle was lying down emotionlessly on her bed, her eyes red from crying. She ran straight home from Sweet Apple Acres and flung herself onto her bed, crying her eyes out from the pain of Applejack's words. After 2 straight hours of crying, she finally settled down into an emotionless stupor and spent the time just staring at the constellation chart on her wall. The unicorn knew in her heart that Applejack didn't mean to hurt Twilight the way she did. The Earth Pony just had a different way of coping, that's all. However, knowing the fact did nothing to ease the pain of Applejack's words inflicted on Twilight. After all, those hurtful words did hold some truth to them. Twilight shook her head. It wouldn't do any pony any good to just... Oh. Spike! Twilight called out. Spike! Clean up these books! Silence filled the room. Twilight had forgotten that Spike's been out of the library ever since she got back in. If he was going to take an afternoon walk, the least he could have done was clean up before he left. Twilight groaned as she plopped herself back down on the bed. As she did, her eyes caught sight of a piece of parchment lying alongside the lopsided stack of books. Come to think of it, Twilight thought, I still haven't sent a friendship report in the past week. I just haven't learned anything about friendship since the funeral. Suddenly, the sound of knocking filled the library and startling Twilight out of her bed. She was about to call out for Spike to open the door, before once again remembering that the dragon was out. What's that Spike doing to be out for more than 2 hours anyway? Twilight muttered to herself. The knocking continued to echo through the room, although, now that she thought about it, the knocking was strangely quiet, too quiet to be really called a knock. Coming! Twilight called as she galloped towards the door. She pulled the door open and was greeted by a sorry sight. Fluttershy, what happened to you? The yellow Pegasus pony was bruised and battered. Her feathers were disheveled and sticking out in odd directions, and her normally flowing pink mane was tangled with twigs and leaves. There were a bunch of shallow cuts in her body with faint traces of blood oozing out of them, and she was incredibly distraught, and she wore an incredibly distraught expression. Twilight, Fluttershy struggled to say between breaths. Rarity, she, and, we, in the, forest, and, Fluttershy, Twilight exclaimed worriedly. Take a moment to catch your breath and calmly tell me what's going on. Fluttershy took a deep breath and paused before breaking the bad news to Twilight. Rarity's been kidnapped! Wake up, pony! The cold splash of water slapped on Rarity's face. The shock caused her to gain consciousness quickly, and the unicorn was greeted by a looming pair of sharp teeth. Rarity took a startled leap back. She frantically surveyed her surroundings. From what she could tell from the unrefined greenery, she was somewhere in the Everfree forest, although she had no idea exactly where. Wait, what's going on here? Rarity inquired with her usual haughty-toned voice. Who are you two, and how dare you handle a lady the way you did? Shut it, pony. The one who spoke was a shadowy figure whose features Rarity could not quite make out in the darkness. Yeah, keep it down, pony. The other one who kidnapped Rarity had a gruff voice and gray coat of fur. Well, aren't you two rude? Rarity criticized. Maybe the same method she used before with the diamond dogs would work on these two. And what's with this pony talk? I do have a name, you know. I told you to shut it, pony, the shadowy one said. That is not how you ask a lady to do you a favor. So far, getting on their nerves seemed to work. But I suppose you cannot refer to me properly if I do not introduce myself. You may call me Miss, or you can call me Rarity, or you can call me Miss Rarity, and maybe— Shut your mouth, pony, the gruff voice once shouted. I thought I told you to call me Miss, Rarity scoffed. You didn't even give me your own names. Even if you are kidnappers, the very least you could do is introduce yourself to me. The shadowy one sighed. Call me Shadow, call him Gruff. Now stop talking before you regret it. Rarity ignored what she thought was an empty threat and continued on with her verbal assault. Shadow? Gruff? Seriously? The shadowy one is called Shadow, and the gruff-voiced one is called Gruff? Well, Obviously, your parents didn't have very good naming sense. Those lack any creativity whatsoever. And those coats of yours are so filthy. I would absolutely die if my name messed up like that, wouldn't you? Oh, wait. Obviously not. My apologies. And dare I say, the smell you two are admitting is absolutely... A paw suddenly grabbed the back of Rarity's head and shoved it into the ground. The surprised pony tasted the foul texture of the dirt before she realized what was going on and struggled with every ounce of strength she had to break free, but the grip on her head was too strong. After what seemed like an eternity, the grip loosened and Rarity was able to break free, panting desperately for air. A second later, she noticed how dirty she was. A strange skittishness crept over her body, and she started to anxiously twitch in place. "I guess you just died once," Shadow commented, smirking. Rarity was able to suppress her urge to panic and instead diverted her thoughts to the current situation. She was not at all expecting that her kidnappers had a backbone in them this time, and she didn't even know what her kidnappers were and why they were kidnapping her. The first logical step of action was for her to gather some information. Rarity spat out some of the dirt that got in her mouth and spoke with much more subdued and compliant tone than earlier. She knew that she couldn't take her kidnappers lightly. Who are you? And why are you kidnapping me?" Shadow tipped his head to Gruff and had him explain. "Well, Pony, we're diamond dogs." Rarity almost did a double take out of surprise. "You two? Diamond dogs?" she said incredulously, forgetting about how she had been acting for the moment and going back to her haughty tone. "That's ridiculous. Diamond dogs were rude, disgusting, and stupid." "Oh, so you talk about our brother in that way, Pony." Shadow bared its fangs. Instantly, Rarity shifted back to her subdued tone of voice. "Of course not. Slip of the tongue, darling." She gave a sheepish smile. Shadow smirked. "You're right about that. Diamond dogs are rude, disgusting, and stupid. However, we are of higher breed than those mutts. The two of us are wolves." "Wolves?" Rarity questioned, not exactly comprehending. Shadow sighed. "Explain, Gruff." "You see, Pony, back before your little Princess Celestia rose the sun for Equestria, a bunch of more species of animals lived in these parts. There was this thing called the food chain, you see, and Celestia came into power with her magic. The food chain just had to go. So she sent all the species that proved a danger to you ponies far off to a faraway land ruled by destruction and anarchy. Of course, we put up a fight, but us non-magical species had no way of standing up against Celestia. And in the end, we signed a truce, agreeing to stay on our side of the border while you ponies lived happily and blissfully, unaware of our plight." Food chain? Rarity stopped listening to Gruff's history lesson after the mention of food chain. "Do pray tell, what does that entail?" the unicorn asked, knowing full well what it would entail. Shadow bared his fangs again. "You see, Pony, us wolves are carnivores, and your little Princess Celestia banished us for a single reason. We eat ponies like you."